The quiet power of letting go. From constant striving to true peace, there comes a moment in life when deep exhaustion sets in. Not the kind from being lazy or giving up, but a profound weariness born from persistent effort. You've been trying so hard for so long, and yet nothing seems to shift. You keep showing up, meticulously doing everything you think is right, pushing harder, thinking more, tirelessly fixing. But despite it all, a frustrating stillness remains. It's more than just irritating. It drains your very soul, as if you're pouring endless energy into a life that stubbornly refuses to respond. This feeling leads to self-doubt, questioning your path, wondering if something within you is fundamentally broken. But what if the problem isn't your lack of effort? What if it's the deeply ingrained belief that effort alone is the answer, while trust, a true grounded trust in life's unfolding, has been unfairly labeled as weakness? The ancient Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, understood this profound truth. They taught that genuine peace isn't found in trying to control every single outcome. Instead, it emerges when we learn to align ourselves with the natural rhythms of existence. Marcus didn't try to bend the world to his will. He learned to adapt his mind to meet it. Perhaps this is the very shift we need. Less forcing, more flowing. Less panic, more presence. The deeper you cultivate trust, the less frantic effort you'll actually need. Not because you stop caring, but because you gracefully release the burdens that were never truly yours to carry. There's a unique strength that reveals itself only when you cease chasing and begin to genuinely listen. The lie of perpetual motion. Why does it sting so deeply when, despite your best efforts, things simply don't move forward? It's not just the stagnation. It's what we unconsciously interpret that stillness to mean. Society often tells us that effort is our primary currency, that our worth directly correlates with how much we give. So when you stretch yourself thin, when you give everything you have, and life offers only silence, it feels intensely personal. It feels as if that stillness is a judgment on your inherent value, rather than simply a matter of strategy, timing, or alignment. This is a dangerous lie, one many of us unknowingly absorbed early in life. We've mistakenly confused constant motion with genuine meaning, believing that being perpetually busy could somehow shield us from disappointment. But what if the real issue was never your discipline, your hustle, or your sacrifices? What if you've simply been conditioned to place all your trust in what you can directly control? Carl Jung famously noted, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." We unconsciously cling to every task, every deadline, every relationship, convinced that if we just try hard enough, nothing will fall apart. Yet this relentless striving isn't true strength. It's a mode of survival, and survival leaves no room for trust. It only knows how to tighten, to perform, to cling. Trust, an act of surrender. Trust, by profound contrast, is an act of letting go. And letting go can feel terrifying when control has become your sole comfort. But here's the quiet revelation no one explicitly teaches us. Trust is not passive. It's not a shrug of indifference or a mere surrender. Trust is profoundly active. It demands clarity. It requires immense courage. It asks you to consciously step back, to breathe deeper, to articulate, "I don't know exactly how this will work out, but I no longer need to force it to." This isn't weakness. It's a form of strength that very few people ever manage to touch. Socrates urged us to live an unexamined life at our own peril. If you truly examine your patterns, the urgency, the constant need for over-explanation, the chronic exhaustion, you might realize you've been living inside a perpetual loop. A loop that whispers your worth is solely tied to your output, that unless you're utterly drained, you haven't tried hard enough. But exhaustion isn't a badge of honor. It's often a clear signal that your energy is leaking into things you are never meant to carry. Effort without genuine alignment simply becomes suffering. You can be sprinting at full speed, yet completely lost. This is why trust is paramount, because it gently guides you back to your true path. Not by speeding things up, but by reconnecting you to what genuinely matters. The wisdom of stillness and knowing yourself. Aristotle wisely stated, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And indeed, trust truly begins with understanding who you are when there's nothing left to prove. Who are you when you're not striving, when you don't need to constantly earn your place? Who are you when you're not micromanaging every single outcome? Most people never discover this because silence feels uncomfortable. Space feels threatening. Stillness feels like an undeniable failure. Yet, stillness is precisely where recalibration occurs. It's where profound insight lives. Plato taught that a life without balance is a life without harmony, and true balance doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing less, but with far greater intention. When you step off the autopilot, when you stop coercing things just to feel a fleeting sense of safety, something remarkable begins to happen. Life starts communicating through quiet nudges, through unexpected moments of peace, through moments you didn't meticulously plan but somehow feel inherently right. This is trust in action. The more you lean into it, the more you recognize you were never meant to endlessly chase everything. You were meant to recognize what is already authentically yours. There is immense power in gracefully releasing what doesn't respond to your authentic presence. There's profound clarity in gently walking away from situations that only seem to survive on your anxiety. No, it won't always be easy. You'll often be tempted to revert, to fix, to prove, to push. But each time you consciously choose stillness over panic, you reclaim a vital piece of your energy. Each time you choose clarity over chaos, you return more deeply to yourself. This is the genuine work, not grinding yourself into dust for fleeting progress, but learning to trust that what's aligned for you doesn't require force. When you stop measuring your worth solely by productivity, a deeper sense of peace emerges. Not the peace of inaction, but the peace of knowing you no longer need to violently shape life. You are shaping it subtly, profoundly, by simply trusting its unfolding. And that, in itself, is the genesis of a vastly different kind of power. Trust as power in motion. Most people mistakenly believe trust means passive waiting, sitting on the sidelines, hoping life will hand them a bone. But true trust? It's not passive at all. It's power in motion. It's not the absence of action. It's the vibrant presence of alignment. It's a quiet, unwavering strength that doesn't shout or scramble. Trust is a way of moving through life without the constant need to wrestle it into submission, without bracing for every imagined impact, or desperately chasing what already belongs to you. You don't need to force people to stay. That version of love, the one that requires you to shrink your authentic self just to be chosen, isn't love at all. It's fear disguised as effort. You don't need to chase perfect timing either. What is truly meant for you will arrive when you are ready, not when you're consumed by anxiety. And you definitely don't need to micromanage every single outcome just to feel secure. Control offers the illusion of safety, but it ultimately robs you of genuine peace. When you trust, you cease sprinting frantically into the future, trying to preemptively fix what hasn't even manifested yet. You stop endlessly rehearsing every possible scenario, crafting backup plans for your backup plans. Instead, you return to the only place where you truly possess power, this very moment. Right here, where your breath is steady. Right here, where your intuition whispers profound truths, if you are quiet enough to hear them. The internal victory. Plato famously stated, "The first and best victory is to conquer yourself." And that's precisely what trust embodies. It's the profound internal win. It's the moment you realize you don't need external control to feel internally steady and secure. It's the courageous act of letting go of the compulsion to react, to fix, to endlessly perform, and replacing it with grounded presence, with an innate knowing dot. So, ask yourself this powerful question. What if the next breakthrough in your life isn't about trying harder, but about finally allowing? What if the answer isn't hidden in more effort, more frantic strategy, or more stress, but in a profound shift towards less resistance? We are so accustomed to working for everyththing that the very idea of simply receiving feels foreign, almost suspicious. Yet, not everything truly valuable arrives through struggle. When you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. That awakening doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from pausing, from choosing not to act until the action itself feels deeply rooted, not merely reactive. Peace, in this profound sense, doesn't slow you down. It sharpens your focus. It simplifies what once felt tangled. It doesn't delay progress. It precisely directs it, because when you're truly aligned, you no longer need to debate every single move. You stop second-guessing yourself at every turn. You don't need 5 backup plans to feel safe. Instead, an inner knowing begins to guide you, quietly, but unmistakably. You begin to trust that not every door needs to be violently kicked open, that the ones truly meant for you will respond to your authentic presence, not your desperate force. Aristotle believed that happiness is the meaning and the purpose of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. Yet so many of us unwittingly trade genuine joy for fleeting control. We white-knuckle our way through choices, believing that tension will somehow keep us safe. But happiness, true, sustainable happiness, flourishes in environments where peace is allowed to speak freely. You don't need to abandon your ambition. You just don't need to let fear be its driver. There is a way to move through life without the constant rush, a way to build, to lead, to grow. Not by clenching your jaw and sprinting through discomfort, but by choosing the path that genuinely feels like an exhale, not a breakdown. Socrates once said, "The shortest and surest way to live with honor in the world is to be in reality what we appear to be." Alignment is that profound reality. It's when your inner world and your outer choices finally begin to match. When the things you say, the things you pursue, and the things you tolerate are no longer in conflict. You stop living reactively and begin living with deep intention. And that's what peace truly offers. Not perfection, but permission. Permission to slow down. Permission to wait. Permission to stop running just because the world expects you to. Because in the profound stillness, something deeper awakens, the part of you that knows exactly where to go next, without the panic, without the pressure. And that part of you? That's the one that leads you to everything real and lasting. The magnetism of authentic presence. You don't need to fight your way into a room that wasn't meant for you. You don't have to exhaust yourself trying to prove that you belong somewhere. You were never truly meant to stay. That kind of desperate striving doesn't lead to belonging. It leads directly to burnout. And perhaps you've felt it, the subtle ache of trying to squeeze into a space that demands you shrink, perform, or endlessly explain your worth rather than simply embody it. You don't need to convince life to notice you. You were never invisible to the things truly aligned with your essence. You don't need to wave your arms, raise your voice, or overcompensate just to be seen. The more you desperately try to prove yourself, the more disconnected you become from your own authentic center. Because at some point, trying to be enough begins to pull you away from the profound part of you that already is enough. Just stop resisting your own natural flow. That quiet inner rhythm, it's always been there, beneath all the external noise. It's not always fast, it's not always loud, but it is always, undeniably, honest. And when you allow yourself to genuinely follow it, something remarkable begins to happen. People start showing up differently. Not because you demanded it, but because you subtly change the energy in the room, simply by being rooted, by being real. Carl Jung once articulated, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." When you stop resisting who you are, when you stop fighting for spaces that demand you abandon yourself, something transformative shifts. Opportunities no longer feel like daunting tests. They feel like genuine invitations. Conversations feel less like transactions and more like authentic connections. You begin to speak, not to impress, but to relate. And in that space, people feel you. They don't just hear you. They feel you not because you pushed, not because you were louder or quicker or sharper, but because your simple, authentic presence made space for something truly genuine. You stop desperately trying to control the narrative and instead begin living your truth. And truth, in its own profound way, has a magnetism that attracts what is real. When you no longer need to be chosen, you start choosing with acute discernment. You stop settling for things that vibrate beneath your true value. That's the kind of power trust brings, not loud, not dramatic. It doesn't need to dominate a room to be felt. It doesn't need applause to feel valid. It's the quiet, unwavering confidence of someone who deeply knows that alignment will always do more than mere performance. It's the grounded strength that doesn't panic when the path isn't clear, because it trusts that true clarity is never rushed. The beginning of every good thing. Plato believed that truth is the beginning of every good thing, both in heaven and on earth. And trust is precisely what allows that truth to rise. When you stop hiding behind your efforts, your masks, your endless explanations, your true essence begins to speak for itself. That's when things truly start moving. Not because you frantically chased them, but because you finally stopped getting in your own way. There's something uniquely magnetic about someone who isn't trying so hard, who isn't desperate to prove, to please, or to persuade. Their energy feels distinct. It's safe. It's steady. It naturally draws in people who aren't interested in a show. It craves substance. And that kind of authentic presence, that kind of still, unapologetic presence, it can't be manufactured. It has to be genuinely lived. Socrates famously said, "Be as you wish to seem." That's what trust allows. The gap between who you truly are and how you show up in the world begins to gracefully close. You become consistent, internally and externally. And from that deeply rooted place, you no longer need to rush, chase, or perform. You just need to stand still, fully, authentically, unshakable. Because when you stop resisting your own natural flow, you don't just find peace, you become peace. And peace doesn't push, it pulls. It doesn't chase, it calls. And what responds to that call? Everything real, everything meant, everything lasting. How to begin the journey of trust? So, how do you even begin to cultivate this trust when all you've known is control? When your first instinct is to overthink, to plan 10 steps ahead, to jump in and fix before anything even has a chance to go wrong? Letting go of such deeply ingrained patterns doesn't happen overnight. It starts in small, quiet, deliberate ways, like pausing before you react. Not jumping to answer every email, fix every difficult situation, or explain yourself endlessly just to keep a fragile peace. That pause, however brief, is immensely powerful. It creates vital space. And in that space, something profound begins to shift. You begin to say no without guilt. Not because you're trying to be difficult, but because you're finally, genuinely, listening to your own inner knowing. You stop bending your personal boundaries to make others feel more comfortable. You stop saying yes just to avoid feeling guilty. You begin to trust that your own needs matter too, and that saying no doesn't make you selfish. It makes you authentically honest. And then there's the stillness. The profound silence that used to make you deeply uneasy, perhaps even scared. At first, your mind will scream to fill it with noise, with frantic motion, with anything that feels productive. But you don't. You stay with it. You breathe deeply into it. And instead of fearing the silence, you begin to hear something sacred within it, your own voice. The one that's been buried under all the pressure to prove. The voice that doesn't rush or worry, but simply knows. Carl Jung encapsulated this beautifully. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. And that's what truly happens. You wake up. Not to some dramatic, entirely new version of yourself, but to the version that has been there all along. The version that doesn't need to perform or panic or perfectly orchestrate things to feel worthy. The version that inherently knows you're already whole, already enough. This is the essence of trust. It's not about blind hope or pretending. Everything is fine. It's about gently coming home to yourself. Learning to feel discomfort without immediately trying to fix it. Allowing hard moments to simply pass without rushing to control them. Trust doesn't ask you to be passive. It asks you to be profoundly present. It asks you to stop running and finally, truly, start listening. Carl Jung also Aristotle taught that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So much of what we label as an inseparable part is actually resistance in disguise. It's the conscious choice to stop outsourcing resistance to slowing down, to external factors, to the discomfort, to stop chasing approval. But that to stop trying to manage, however cleverly disguised as ambition. Because when you genuinely trust, tension, you no longer need to hold everything together to feel safe. You begin to understand the beautiful unfolding that's already happening right in front of you. Invitation of stillness. Consider this. How many poor choices have you made from the desperate fear of waiting too long? How many jobs, relationships, conversations, or commitments have you impulsively leapt into simply to escape the profound discomfort of patience? And how often did you find yourself right back in chaos, telling yourself it was progress, when deep down it was just frantic motion? Silence often scares people, not because it's inherently dangerous, but because it's revealing. It reveals all the internal noise we've meticulously avoided with endless productivity. It holds up a mirror to the parts of us that are still. Learning how to be truly okay without constant external validation. But trust teaches you that silence isn't empty. It is sacred. It's the space where life begins to breathe on its own terms again. It's the fertile ground where intuition speaks louder than fear, where true guidance doesn't need to scream. It simply whispers. Plato remarked, "The greatest wealth is to live content with little." That profound contentment, that inner stillness, that doesn't crave constant external stimulation, isn't found through grasping. It's discovered in the act of letting go of the mistaken belief that urgency equals importance. It's found in stepping back, even when every fear-driven impulse screams. To step forward. Trust empowers you to make decisions from a place of clear vision instead of external pressure. It creates vital room to truly feel before acting, to genuinely listen before speaking, to deeply align before moving. And that sacred space? That's precisely where you begin to discern the fundamental difference between what's truly meant for you and what you've simply been conditioned to chase. Trying might get you there faster, but trust ensures that when you arrive, you're not empty, that you haven't lost your peace, your center, or your invaluable sense of self in the process. The barrenness of a busy life. Socrates once warned, "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." If you've ever achieved everything you thought you wanted, only to feel more anxious and unfulfilled than ever, you intuitively understand his meaning. In a world utterly obsessed with relentless pace, trust is a radical act of rebellion. It's a profound return to inner knowing, a soft yet firm refusal to succumb to panic, and a powerful reminder that not everything truly valuable needs to be hunted down. Some things, especially the most meaningful ones, come not through brute force, but through a state of readiness. And sometimes, readiness looks exactly like doing less. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally learned how to truly receive. If you've spent years conditioned to believe that pain is the unavoidable price of progress, then trust will initially feel dangerous. It won't feel like freedom. It will likely feel like failure. Because when your worth is inextricably linked to struggle, anything that doesn't hurt enough feels suspicious. Letting go, even just a little, can feel like slipping, like falling behind. But the deeper truth is, you might have been climbing a mountain that was never even yours to ascend. This is where the challenge lies, because for so long, the suffering became an integral part of your story. You've woven your identity around the hustle. You've wrapped your self-worth around how much discomfort you can endure. Somewhere along the way, you started believing that burnout was discipline, that the more exhausted you were, the more dedicated you must be, and that constant anxiety, being perpetually wired and on edge, meant you were on the correct path. But what if all that tension isn't a sign of progress? What if it's a clear signal you're deeply out of alignment? The shift from effort to alignment, Carl Jung, again reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. For many of us, that unconscious belief, the one that insists you must suffer to succeed, is quietly steering our lives. It makes rest feel lazy. It makes ease feel unearned. It convinces you that unless you're constantly proving something, you're simply not enough. But here's a profoundly different thought. What if the life you truly desire doesn't reside in endless effort? What if it lives in alignment? What if it's not about grinding until you collapse, but about consciously choosing what genuinely resonates with who you are, deeply and truthfully, without needing to force it into place? That shift from relentless effort to genuine alignment is subtle yet transformative. It changes absolutely everything. Alignment doesn't demand you abandon responsibility. It gently insists you stop abandoning yourself. It doesn't mean you stop showing up. It means you stop showing up from a place of desperation. When your actions stem from alignment, they still matter immensely, but they are no longer soaked in panic. They are rooted in pure clarity. Aristotle held that pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And it's true. When you're aligned, work still requires effort, but it ceases to feel like suffering. There's a natural rhythm, a profound purpose, a sense of breath in your daily movements. You're no longer dragging yourself through each day, hoping you'll finally feel worthy. At some distant finish line, you feel that worthiness now as you walk the path. Reclaiming your true self. Here's the powerful catch. Letting go of the suffering often means letting go of the very story that made you feel valuable through it. And that can feel like losing a part of yourself. Because who are you if you're not constantly proving something? Who are you without the relentless pressure? You are someone who is courageously beginning again. Not from a place of lack, but from a profound wisdom. You are someone who finally understands that peace isn't the absence of effort. It is the absence of self-betrayal. You've realized that your body wasn't made to be at war with itself, that your mind wasn't meant to live in a constant state of fight or flight, and that your spirit wasn't born merely to survive each day, was born to live. Socrates offered a powerful secret to change. Focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. That's precisely what alignment offers. Not a rejection of growth, but a profound redirection away from self-punishment and towards limitless possibility. You begin to build, not from fear, but from a deep, abiding faith. Not because you're desperately trying to escape something, but because you're finally moving towards something truly real. Letting go will still feel wrong on some days. You'll still feel the primal urge to overdo, overthink, overcompensate. But with practice and patience, trust becomes easier. Your nervous system gradually softens. Your inner dialogue becomes notably kinder. You stop confusing chaos with progress. And what once felt unfamiliar ease, rest, flow begins to feel like home. And when that transformation occurs, the world around you subtly shifts too. Not because you pushed harder, but because you stopped pushing against all the wrong things and started listening to the right ones. The wisdom of stillness in decision-making weren't made to clench your jaw through every decision. That tightness in your chest, the constant tension in your shoulders, it's not a badge of honor. It's a clear signal that you've been carrying life too rigidly, too fearfully. Somewhere along the line, you absorbed the idea that pressure equals progress, that if something doesn't feel heavy, it must not be working. But this kind of thinking transforms life into a perpetual emergency. You begin walking on eggshells, not out of passion, but out of a desperate need for survival. And that's simply not what you were built for. You weren't designed to be in a perpetual state of bracing. You weren't meant to second-guess your every step, desperately hoping that anxiety could somehow predict the future. There's another way, one most people unfortunately forget exists. It's a way where decisions don't arise from panic, but from grounded presence. A way of moving that begins with a deep, clear knowing, not the fear of being left behind. Plato wisely advised, better a little which is well done than a great deal imperfectly. Yet we live in a world that relentlessly rewards speed over depth. We rush because we believe stillness is risky, that if we're not leaping, we're falling behind. But the stark truth is, some of the very